All right, welcome to the Dealan-de podcast. I am Dealan-de, and I'm with Amy Palatnick, and she is a Mia teacher, a pottery person, potter, is how you say it,
A
uh,
pottery person, yeah, a potter.
a coach, and all sorts of great things. I know you have a pleasure boot camp coming up, I believe,
Yeah.
and just seems like you're a busy and adventurous person, and I thought we'd just launch into a conversation. I know, looked at your website. You talked about a lot about your path and your journey. That you were going to be a doctor at one point, and then switched to being a different life path. And maybe do I guess before I jump into that, what how could you introduce yourself or tell us a bit about yourself? I guess.
Oh, okay. Well, I do feel like my main thing about myself is that I am blessed to love my life and to love life. I think I'm the happiest person I know and the most satisfied with life itself. And that's been a real gift to me that I've learned really young to follow my heart. When I was about 19, I learned to just follow bliss and follow my heart. I got this huge download from the universe that was what life was about, not success in the way that I might think of success. And so I've received that as a great gift. And now I'm at a time of my life where I want to really um, dispense that to everybody who has a need of that as well. So I've been doing my best to um, I'm like making a pot here to form my worldview into a transmittable package so I can teach people the way that I've kind of curated my own life in a way that I hope can be adopted by people of any ilk, of any age, of any class, of any yeah, just hopefully they're universal principles that are adoptable by anybody, that are free, they're
Yeah,
free.
yeah, nice. So
Yeah.
you were going to potentially be a doctor, or that was like your plan, and then all of a sudden, like you said, you had this download and you took it. What happened there? What led you down this path?
Right. Yeah. So I was my identity when I was young, when I was in grade school and high school, was being smart. And so that was what was important to me, that I was on top of my class and that I was getting good grades and I had prepared myself for success. For whatever reason, I absorbed that from culture that success was important. And in my mind, success meant being a doctor. I couldn't think of anything that sounded more successful than that. I was pretty sure I couldn't be the president. So I was just too much of a rebel to be the president, but I did think I could be a doctor.
Uh-huh.
And so I just kind of thought I was supposed to do that, that I was just supposed to follow this path of success until I had a mansion on a hill somewhere or something like that. And then when I was in college, well, first of all, I couldn't stand any of my classes. Something inside me chose a very liberal, I went to Wesleyan University in Connecticut, which is a very, or at least at the time was, a very liberal, forward thinking, school. That was so I had a very kind of conservative path laid out for myself when I was surrounded by kind of freaks and weirdos of the best kind, and so something in me had chosen that environment. And then when I got there, first of all, like I said, I didn't like my classes. I think I said that I didn't like my academic classes at all. um, I felt really strange there. And then I started having all these accidents, and
Mm.
I got mugged at knife point. That was the first one, is that somebody held a really long knife straight to my solar plexus, which, if you know anything about the solar plexus, it's like about our personal power and our will. So it was almost like a sword from the universe was like pointing me to my own will, to my own personal power. And then I got into a car accident. And anyway, just my sensors were open when I got into these accidents because that was kind of abnormal for me. And I was paying attention. And during that time of extreme openness and paying attention, it was a Joseph Campbell book basically landed in my lap. And I just opened it to a random page. and it said follow your bliss. And when I saw that, I just felt like I went into an altered state, like as though I were like gonna faint or something like that. Follow your bliss. Just three little words kind of hit me like a stone over the head. And I thought, I've been doing this all wrong. Like this mansion on the hill, a mansion, that's a lot of rooms to clean, Like I didn't think this through. So, anyway, I was just like, I dumped my biology major. I instead majored in Buddhism, in Eastern religions, especially Buddhism. I started taking pottery classes, dance classes. I learned how to play guitar. I took whitewater rafting, in my like for my higher education, South Indian drumming. Like I was just like whatever, anything that was kind of like different and creative and unique. That's what I wanted. I was just hungry for something new and juicy and different from that kind of heavily conservative path I had laid out for myself because of these shoulds. And whenever I hear myself say should, I like to do this big full body eye roll. I should go to med school. So yeah, and then from then it was just bliss, I followed my bliss. The first thing I did when I read that from Joseph Campbell, Follow Your Bliss, is I drew a little cartoon of myself, uh, like following a heart, like on a path, following a heart, and I was just like kind of basically like running after this heart, and that's been the symbol of my life ever since. I've just only done, not that every second of every day is exactly what I want to do. I don't think that that's really possible. But in the bigger picture, around career especially, I am like really committed to being in choice and yeah, and making it the best I can be, making myself the best I can be, doing the best I can do, and stepping into the unknown regularly.
Beautiful, nice. And I love that you were like, it's not like you all of a sudden took a doctor to now like a whole new career path. Like this is my bliss, this new career path. You like were just like, oh, this and like this looks interesting and that looks interesting and that looks
Yes.
like you just followed what just felt interesting and fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
shiny objects, right?
Shiny object.
Follow the shiny object. Go towards what smells good. Yeah.
And then someone that was like Nia. Nia, you can maybe describe some what Nia is. Maybe
Right.
someone who doesn't know.
So I became a potter was like the career I chose because that just seemed like it was like anyway, it was what I enjoyed the most in college, and I became a potter. And then I wound up having a baby, which I also wanted to do. That was like a conscious choice to have a baby. And after a couple of years, I just was starting to feel really frumpy. Like pottery is very earthy, it's like everything is heavy. You're sitting down at the wheel all the time. It's just like everything is like going down. And I had this friend who had been chronically depressed. She was just like kind of severely chronically depressed. And one day we were sitting in her kitchen and she was looking out the window and she was just said something like, isn't everything so beautiful? And I was like, who, what? What are you talking about? Who is this? What
Uh-huh.
happened to my friend? And she said, I think it's this Nia class I'm taking. And I was like, sign me up. Whatever she's having, that's what I want. So the next day I went with her to Nia, and within the first few minutes of class, I was crying, like the music came on, and I walked in there with probably normal insecurities of like, oh no, a dance class, will I be able to do this? What is this? What am I getting myself into? And the music came on and my teacher just started moving with like all this like kind of like organic full body like swishy movements. And so I just started crying. I was like, oh, this, I can do that. So, and then, I think by the end of that class, I had paid for like, a month or several months. And by the end of a month or several months, I was signed up to become a teacher. And it's just all been that since then. And Nia is really about honoring yourself, your body, how it is today, loving your body, living inside your body and moving in ways that feel pleasure based. Yeah, and just always listening for pain and discomfort and responding to it, both inside and outside of class.
Beautiful. Yeah, I know. If you ever see some of the earlier podcasts. A lot of it's about ecstatic dance and free form dance.
Hmm.
But for me too, when I was in my early 20s, I wasn't doing anything like dance. I was kind of like you were. I was in a similar place of like just kind of exploring what brought me joy. And at the college I was at, was a NIA instructor, and they're like, "You got to try this. It's not aerobics, but it's like it, and it's fitness, but not like fitness. Go check it out." And I just same thing. I was like, "Oh my god, I love this." And I remember asking her like, "What else would you suggest? I love this." She's like, "Oh, go check out Five Rhythms and all the other stuff." And that led me down that path and all that stuff. But NIA was such what I guess it maybe describe it a little different from because it's not free form. It is following an instruction, but there's something amazing I loved about that too. So
Yeah, I like to say that it's kind of like ecstatic dance with some simple choreography. It's like simple. So there's this concept of form and freedom that Nia holds both. So we give a form, but it's hopefully a form that most people can follow, like step together, step together, something like that. Lift your hand. But everybody's supposed to do it in their own way. So it was like you find your freedom inside the form. And then you're free to break out of the form at any point. I had this one student, he was so great. Back before the pandemic, I used to have pretty big classes, and he came to every class and he never did the choreography. Like, I never, and never, one time, only once I saw him out there doing the choreography. I was like, oh my gosh, Tom, you're doing the move.
that's beautiful.
Yeah, but I just love that, the whole spectrum of freedom from do exactly what I'm doing to do nothing that I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that because sometimes in free form, you could get stuck in just your what you're used moving your body like, and you end up doing a very simpler, a very you're almost within your own tiny structure. But what I love something about Nia is it goes, "Well, wait a minute, move your arm out like this, do this," and you're like, "Oh, I move my body like that, and I don't maybe like cross my body, arms, like all these different things." I go, "Oh, I'm inviting you to move in a different way."
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
The kind of theory behind Nia, or the intelligence behind Nia, is that the 52 moves are designed to move all the body parts in the way that they were designed to move. So moving the joints in the way that they like to move. Whereas something like ballet is sometimes trying to get you into these contorted positions that aren't necessarily like the body's way, the way that the
Hmm.
body really wants to move, but it's for like the art of it, the picture of it, the way that it looks, as opposed to the way that it feels.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then so you did and you're still doing pottery. That's still your, and what has that been like as a as someone who, I'm going to choose your self-employed career. What was that? How was that for you? What has it been like to engage in that?
Well, interestingly, it's a lot like what you just said. Like sometimes when you free dance and nobody's leading you or guiding you, you just kind of do the same thing. So having a pottery business, I had a very successful pottery business, and but that meant I had a specific amount. I sold at the Saturday market here in Eugene, Oregon, and I had like, limited space. I was in an 8x8 booth, and you can only bring so many pots, lug so many pots down to market and set them up in a limited amount of space. And I really kind of honed, that real estate of my booth to be like the pots that sold the best, pots that people expected me to have. So I developed a line of pots. I have a couple sitting right here with me. I
Right.
developed a line, and then I kind of became a little bit like a slave to that line,
Mm,
like I was like I kind of boxed myself into this corner where I was just only making these same pots. And the mechanics of making them was always amazing. And the way they came out, they were always amazing. And I just always felt so good about them. And at the same time, I felt like I had trapped myself, like I had limited myself into these forms. So I took a pretty big break from pottery, and I'm just now going back to it with no pottery booth. No, the only thing I have is old old customers who are on my email list, and the rest is just me and the clay and the wheel. And so I can do anything I want, and I feel very much reborn into the pottery studio right now, making pots that I had never even conceived of, and looking on YouTube for new things that I can make, and just I'm having a rebirth with pottery right now, and it's it's juicy and amazing, and it's funny that I was the only one, I put those chains on myself. I limited myself, but it was so I could make a living at the time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It's like that's like a relationship. It's like what you create, what you put out there in a customer. It's like you have a relationship, and like you're talking about pleasure, authenticity. It's like you then in that relationship can create a very unauthentic way. It's like you being in the moment with it. Like probably
Mhm.
maybe back in the day it was like, oh, this is great, and then all of a sudden it becomes stagnant. And
Yeah.
like, how do you, in that relationship? Because on some level, like there is a relationship, and then how do you stay authentic and keep moving with that relationship to be like, oh, this is, I have to move, I have to keep changing, and the relationship changes,
Yeah.
to adapt to that, but to keep flowing with that ever adapting, um, relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
it's
truth
fascinating.
of life, the like one
Yeah.
thing that we can count on is that everything changes except for my pots. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah, 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 exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I always so admired other artists. I would watch them, other people at market who would bust out of their own molds constantly, and I could see the awkwardness, and I could see the learning, and how at the beginning, their new things were kind of like a little bit, you know, not settled, and I just so admired their freedom and trust to follow that thing that said, I must continue to evolve as an artist. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, I love that because it keeps you alive, as an artist, as a practitioner. It's like nothing stays stagnant, nothing stays unchanged.
Yeah.
And as it's like, oh, that's exciting, that's great, and then it's over, and you're like, do I recreate that exciting? Do I recreate that and give that back? Like another new product, the same the same creation, or do I like keep evolving and moving it forward? Um, yeah, that's a beautiful thing. Like even the greatest thing could, you know, be like, oh, that's nice, after a while.
Mhm. And I would evolve like a little bit at a time. Like I'd like introduce a little new design or a new color, but it was still kind of confined, and it's just been so fun to like really break into like whole new forms and whole new styles, and
Mm,
yeah, yeah, it's what a great thing that we can do.
yeah, I love that. Yeah, and also just there's kind of like a being kind and gentle to yourself as you do it. Like you don't need to like, I'm gonna throw everything I used to do away and do everything new and completely different. You can do that, but you can
Mhm.
also do, like you said, just a little, just you can make a little change. I guess you could do it all.
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
just keep moving through it, trying
Right. There's
something new.
probably times for that big evolution and other times that are more for those little baby step evolutions, right? We can kind of
Yeah,
feel it too. It's like in the air, we like get uncomfortable in our skin like a snake that needs to shed. And it's just like tossing out the old style,
yeah, yeah.
something new.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
And then now, tell me a bit about your boot camp, or what we're kind of. I was like, oh, how are we going to talk about pleasure? And I'm like, we're literally talking about it now. So like,
Mhm.
like how to.
Yeah, pleasure boot camp. So that is I was a potter, and then I became a Nia teacher, and then I magically went to school for process work. I don't know if you've ever heard of process work, but the founder of the school is Arnold Mindell, and he's just this kind of wild and very loving human. And process work is just like one of the most beautiful paradigms you can imagine. And
Mm,
it's a model for therapy, for coaching, for facilitation, and for working on oneself. And it just has a lot of really great tools, and it's a model of personal evolution and of accepting all of who we are, or the whole spectrum of who we are, which is, it's in alignment with Nia and ecstatic dance, just like express it all, like be it all, be everything, be the whole spectrum. So process work gave me a lot of new tools, And I started to be a therapist, and I had clients who I absolutely loved. And one of them told me about realization process, which is a meditation practice, a somatic meditation practice. And I wound up getting trained in that. So I have all these different things I do, and I had started to feel really splayed out. And a client would come to me, and I kind of wonder, like, what am I supposed to be doing with this client? Are we meditating? Are we doing process work? What's going on? Coaching. I became a coach too. Anyway, just recently, I just had this big inspiration to kind of do that thing and coagulate, combine all of my things that I do into a package, into like kind of the Amy package. When I was in school for process work, I had this teacher, and it's a very, very, very wonderful, lovely teachers. And one of them said to me, like, you know what you need to do? You need to teach people how to be like Amy. And I was like, what? No, how do you do that? But it was like such a gift that he said that. And I've been kind of marinating on that concept for a long time. Like, if I were to kind of consolidate all of my practices and gifts and theories and all the things that kind of buttress me in my life, how would I do that? And so that's how I came up with Pleasure Boot Camp, which is like a 1 month course. And this is the last week. Tomorrow Wednesday? Yeah, tomorrow is the last day of the 1 month course, basically. And it's just been incredible. The way that I organized it was by the elements. So the first week was air, and we worked on becoming more spacious in our thoughts and in our bodies. Um, this is more from realization process that we as humans, as we experience traumas in our lives, wherever we experience trauma, there's a gripping, and we'll grip in our bodies. As I'm saying this, I can feel it in my jaw, that I have a gripping in my jaw. And just yesterday, I found a gripping in my sacrum. So we grip to hold on like a little scared monkey, like, life is scary, people are scary. And so we grip, and wherever we grip, we actually can't really inhabit the body. We're not really able to fully inhabit and live inside the body in those areas. So, but that's great to know that, because that means you can find the grippings and really relax and release them. And that can happen in the mind, mental grippings, always in the body. There's always like a corresponding gripping in the body. So that's kind of the easiest place to work with it, because it's so physical and obvious. Um, and so anyway, the first week was about becoming more spacious in our minds and more spacious in our bodies through kind of beginning this meditation on, where do I grip? Where am I hanging on? Where can I relax? And then the second week was about earth. The element was earth. And it's about our bodies and also our relationship with food, our relationships with our bodies and food. And I do something called pleasure eating, which means that when I eat, I remove all distractions. I eat very slowly, and I activate all my senses. So I'm like actually looking at the food. I'm really tasting the food, which, as much as I have loved food in the past, in like throughout my whole life, I've always been a lover of food, but I was never really experiencing the food. It was more like, I don't know where the love came from, but I loved it so much. And then I would eat it so fast, and then I would feel sick. I'd probably eat too much, and then I'd feel sick. So last year, I realized I was teaching a workshop on fear, and I realized that I was eating out of fear. Like, my eating, as much as I loved food, it was kind of fear-based, as though there wasn't going to be enough for me. Somebody was going to eat my leftovers if I didn't eat it all right now. Somehow there was like fear in the background of my eating process. And then my whole eating life changed after that, and I decided to eat for pleasure. And like, what is that? What does that mean to eat for pleasure? And for me, it was like slowing way down. Like, my meals now probably take 3 times as long as they used to take, which is moving from like 5 minutes to 15. The actual meal never takes, in a restaurant or something, the actual meal when you're eating, it takes about 5 or 10 minutes. So I try to eat for about 20 minutes. And my portions are smaller, and they last a lot longer. So I'm much more quality oriented than quantity. And I'm like also full of gratitude when I eat. Like, where did this food come from, and who are all the hands and animals and worms and minerals and everything, the sunlight and everything that went into making this bowl of food or plate of food. And anyway, I lost like 20 pounds. I didn't even know I had any weight to lose when I started this journey. I just knew I wanted to switch from fear-based eating to pleasure-based eating, and I lost 20 pounds in a short period of time. Like, I'm a tiny little person, and I was like a little bit round, but I like didn't realize that like I had weight to lose. I thought I was maybe sick. I started going to the doctor to make sure that I was okay because I was losing so much weight without dieting, you know. So pleasure-based eating, that's week 2. And also like uh, there's a daily practice in Pleasure Boot Camp to love the body, and we do it in a systematic way from the feet. Today we're on the mouth. We're loving the mouth, but we're going up through the body.
Mm.
And yeah, and then I also have people like touch themselves differently in the shower. Like, the shower is a great place where we have like almost full access to our whole bodies with our hands. Our bodies are amazingly designed that these hands can touch like almost anywhere on our whole body. But in the shower, what do we mostly do is like kind of like scrub, 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 you know, and we're not really generally using the shower as an opportunity to touch ourselves with love. But it's a great opportunity, and it's daily. So Pleasure Boot Camp is really about like changing the way we do what we do. It's really nothing new at all, but it's kind of reorienting to pleasure in every aspect of the basics of daily life. Week 3, sorry, this is taking a minute
No,
to
I love
describe
it. I love
pleasure
it. Go
boot
for
camp.
it.
Okay. Week 3 was movement and emotions. So we worked with, yeah, moving with pleasure, and a concept from Nia called dancing through life. And can I make everything that I do kind of a dance? You know, can I self-heal as I reach for something from the cabinet, you know, or as I'm washing a dish? Can that be healing to my shoulder blade? You know, can I use the opportunity to move that we're always doing, to self heal and to move for pleasure, to feel like I'm dancing? And also emotions. Can we free ourselves in the range of emotions? And is there a way to find pleasure in any emotion? So, you know, we tend to kind of think of certain emotions as the bad ones or the negative ones, and others as more pleasure based. But I have definitely learned over the last year that I get a lot of pleasure out of anger, a lot of pleasure out of anger, like amazing, like a rush of power. So I think that they're just kind of freeing up that spaciousness in our minds, freeing up the way that we see things. Uh, we can we can tweak the way that we do what we do and seek pleasure even in the most challenging emotions. And then tomorrow, this week, is spirit, and that's going to be about like the magic of life and interacting with life in a way that we are dancing with life, that we're flirting with our environment, that we're playing, uh, we're bringing ourselves to life, you know, and we're also open to what life has to bring to us. So it's really kind of a flirtatious, playful, open, being attuned to the magic that's wanting to come to you. Um, yeah, so that's what the 4th week is. And it's been just really special. And I think everybody in Pleasure Boot Camp is like, what do you mean it's over? You know, we can't be done yet. Like, we need more. So I think I'm going to come up with a year-long, like a pleasure mastery course, you know, so people can feel like more hand holding through the whole year. And then
Oh.
they'll be pleasure warriors by the end.
Oh, I like that. Pleasure
Yeah.
Warriors. That's a good
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. I have a free open Facebook group called Pleasure Warriors. Anybody can join
Okay.
that. Yeah.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's Pleasure Boot Camp in a really
Okay.
big nutshell.
Okay. Nice. I love
Yeah.
it. So how does relating to your, that you found of really following your bliss and this work you're doing, how do you relate that to a world at large that's not necessarily doing that work or being in that work? How does that affect you? How do you move and obviously interact in some ways because you're teaching like, hey, I want to
Right.
share this world,
Right.
how's that experience like of staying in that space while the world is experiencing or or doing something else, you know.
Right, all the suffering and all the pain and all the violence. Well, there's a prerequisite to Pleasure Boot Camp, and that is a free workshop I have up on YouTube called Externalizing the Inner Critic. And I think that the plague of society is internalized criticism, and I really feel like without that, if we weren't filled with shame and guilt that we've inherited through our culture, through society, we wouldn't need to have any wars or violence or hatred or power over. It's only the negative things that we do to ourselves and the lack of self-love and the way that we turn against ourselves that creates so much distress in the world. Otherwise, we'd be working together as a community, as a global village. If we had that internal negativity off of us. And so I feel like that's all the problems in the world are just because we are projecting the violence that we've internalized, gets projected out or turned in more on ourselves. So that's my like I have an internal superhero. My internal superhero, I'm like up above the clouds, when you're in an airplane and you're like, "Oh wow, look at the clouds are down there and I'm up here." So I'm up there and I have like a sword that's really really long and I'm doing battle with the global inner critic up there. I'm just kind of slaying the inner critic. Although I think that the better thing to do really with each person's individual critic is to coach the inner critic to be your own coach, because a critic is really a coach, an undeveloped coach. So, yeah, so what I have people do in the workshop is make a little icon, a little effigy of their critic and get it out of their heads where they can see it. And this sounds like the most simple, ridiculous little move. I'll show you mine. He's always nearby. He's right here. His name is Czar Fuzzy Mouth. It's great to
Nice.
have around during a podcast because then if I have any criticism of myself, I just let it be over there in him. I don't have to have it here in me. I can just be like, okay, well, he's jabbering over there, but that's fine. I can be here on my podcast with you. So getting the internalized critic out and seeing it and being able to dialogue with it and knowing the things that like the critic, I say that the critic is a one-trick pony. It just kind of says the same thing over and over. It's super boring if you actually like externalize it and and capture those phrases that it tends to use or that big accusation that it has of you. It gets boring fast, but if it's inside, it's almost like we're kind of like self-destructing, we're like eating ourselves, we're chewing on our bones and stuff like that and ripping our hair out and walking around with this heavy cold filled bag of shame. So getting the critic out is like so much freedom. It really is so much freedom, and we all deserve to not have the critic living inside ourselves because we need its power. Actually, like we need that power that it takes from us. And in process work, Arnold Mindell, I heard him once say that he feels like humans spend 85% of their vital energy in the battle against the inner critic. And that's a whole lot of energy to sacrifice. If we could
Yeah,
have a little bit of that back, we'd be a lot better off. Yeah. If we could love ourselves and each other, the world would be a different place. Yeah. So
I
that's
love
what I
it.
want to help people with.
So what I would love your thought on this. So is it what like so some people would say, there's some often we feel very justified against criticizing or critiquing the other, like, oh, Trump and Trump supporters are this, Putin's a bad guy, Biden's a bad guy, cancel culture, whatever, like these people,
The
whatever
bad
side,
people.
yeah, the bad people, whoever they are. And
Right.
it feels so justified often. We feel very like they're doing this to our society or whatever. How do you relate that to that being an inner critic, or how is that, what is that happening there?
Like righteousness. Is
Yeah.
that right?
Or like, and even just that sense of like, you know, and some people are doing like, oh my gosh, they're uh blowing up the, whatever they're doing, this or that, whatever bad thing, like, oh my gosh, the awful, I'm so angry at the awful, railroad company for that tragedy in Ohio. I'm so angry at this community for trying to cancel my person or this like, there's these things that feel like I'm so right, this is so wrong,
Right,
and I get
right.
so angry, and I'm reading the news, and I'm, scrolling, and I just don't know the next opinion, and it's like, how do you what do you how does that relate to the inner critic, or what do you think, because that's a lot of energy gets spent in our world doing those kind of things, seems
It's
like.
true. Yeah. I mean, I really wish that on a global scale that we had a council of elders that was like, I feel like there's a problem that we're divided into states and countries and that there is no, I mean, I guess we have the United Nations, but I don't know what it actually does or if it actually does anything. I don't know that much about politics, I have to say, but I do long for the village. And I think that we have done so much dividing and separating away from kind of tribal culture that we've lost a lot. I feel like the nuclear family is a terrible idea, like being separated into a house. Just because of being a therapist, you just see how many people get so damaged in their beautiful looking families, just
Mhm.
we're so isolated. We have this tendency to isolate, like divide and separate and conquer and whatever. So, first of all, with anything like, like the bad guy, I think it's good to think just like that there's something pleasure based in a difficult emotion. There's a power in the thing that we separate out and say is wrong. So it's helpful to each of us individually, I think, to have enough fluidity to at least step into that role of the other, like to step into the Trump role and to see like what's there for me. Like if I hate Trump so much, he has a power over me then. My hatred of him gives him a power over me. He's the disturber. He's disturbing me and it's like eating into my lunch hour kind of thing. It's like eating into my dreams, it's eating into my heart. I'm spending too much energy on this thing. So let me get the gift. What is it about Trump that we as a culture or me as an individual needs to receive the gift and move on in my life, And I really feel like Trump being like so egomaniacal, he like kind of pushed the button on the humility of our culture, And he was kind of like the one that was, like narcissistic, like able to say like, like I'm the best, which I think that a lot of us kind of could use a homeopathic dose of that we tend to, at least for me, I'll say, I tend to be too like giving away, giving to others, and so I just think that there was something wonderful that I got out of him about like just kind of like we can all puff our chests up a little bit more, not to be power over. It's a homeopathic dose. It's not like let's all be like Trump, but it's like the snake venom version of it, like you take a tiny bit of the medicine. And I think that there's a process work concept that a disturber tends to rise up to kind of polarize a group and teach the group a little bit of something that it needs. So anyway, I'm not sure that I totally answered your question, and I had a few different thoughts about it. I do think that it's important to think in terms of ecology. And ecology means, is it good for me? Is it good for us? And is it good for the world? That's what I think of as ecological thinking. So something like Putin right now, um, like Trump was awful, but Putin is horrendous, Like Putin is like a maniac, and he's really being incredibly destructive, obviously. And it's so unecological. So e- I feel frustrated personally that we as a globe, we as a world haven't put this into check, that somehow this continues to happen, that this war continues to go on, that this one man, I think of it as one man, hasn't been isolated and put into therapy. I think he needs sexual healing personally. I think everybody just needs sexual healing and we'd be a lot better off. But yeah, yeah, I think I mean, I wouldn't get any joy from like, murdering Putin, but I do think he should be confined, contained, and taken out of power, and somebody who had more of an ecological, global uh, perspective. That's what every world leader, there should be a a job description. Like you need to be able to think globally and for the good of all, and we don't want dangerous leaders poisoning our world. Like it's just a really bad idea. There should be a system of checks and balances globally against having world leaders like that, I think. I
Yeah.
wish. What do you think?
Um, I think the touch on that's part of like I think the first like you said a thread at something at the beginning, almost like we saw the world as a whole, that we're all in this together, that there's nobody outside of it. Like even someone like Putin is not outside of the human family.
Yeah.
And it's like that's you started saying something at the beginning that made me go, oh yeah, that's it. Like that we're all part of a human family. There's
Yeah.
nobody outside that. And then I started thinking as you're talking, that was like, oh, the inner critic is basically like that part. Like, why do we get angry? Why are we angry at Putin? Why are we angry at Trump? And it's because a part of us feels like, oh, we're not valued, we're not whole, because they're getting to squish something that we value without any repercussion. So
Yeah.
something in us goes, oh, I'm not valued. I'm not. Like that's I am valuable. And there's a part of us, I think, that it hits on that wound, which is then the inner critic that goes like, hey, I'm valuable. Like, but that inner critic's like, no, you're not. You're not valuable. You're not good enough. You're not right enough. And there's that hurts because it activates that us. So we go strike out, we project out like, oh, Putin's the bad guy. Trump's the bad guy. Whoever Biden's the bad guy. This person's the bad guy because they're telling me something about myself that I don't want to be true, which is I'm not worthy, you know?
Right. Right. I
Um,
have no power.
yeah, I have no power. And something like Trump or Putin, they're speaking to something that is true for a community or somebody out there that is like, hey, we need to be heard. Like
Right.
I what's his name? Marshall Rosenberg, nonviolent communication. He had that phrase that violence is a desperate suicidal attempt just to say please. You
Mm.
know? So
Yeah, how beautiful.
yeah. So I think of any violence that we're like, oh my God, that's awful. If we can pull back and go, oh, that's that group, that person's a desperate attempt to say, like, hear me, see me, I'm valuable, I'm important,
Right. I
um,
need your
and
attention. I
I
need
need
your
your
ear.
attention.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if we could give each other that attention and go, okay, instead of like the inner critic goes, no, you're bad, you're wrong, you're awful. No,
Hmm.
you're bad. No, you are. No, you are. Was it Dr. Harry? What was your inner critic? I love it.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
Czar Fuzzy Mouth.
yeah. The Dr. Fuzzy Mouth being like, "You're the bad guy. No, you're the bad guy. I got a prescription for this. Let's get rid of him." But
Yeah, he's actually pretty great, my guy.
I like it.
I love him. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But then, yeah, and that we all just need some love and care and picking a path that's right. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I used to think, and still do think, that violence is a form of intimacy. It's
Mm,
like if you imagine, like, like in the old days with like knives and blood, and like you're like there with the other person's body fluids, or like wrestling and you've got them and you're right there with them so close with all your emotions, like it's a place where like emotions can be raw, only for in the United States, like football games, are like the only place where men can show their emotions, and violence, like you can really get emotional and up close with somebody. And yeah, I think it's, kind of displaced need for intimacy.
that is a fascinating way of looking at it. Actually, and that is amazing. Actually, I love that analogy because often people say like in battle, it's they're the most alive. Someone feels the
Mm.
most like finally I'm alive.
Right,
Unfortunately, it leads to like trauma and all that stuff. But like, yeah, that all that inner block, all that inner critic is now like it's fully on the battlefield, being fully
right.
realized,
Life or
and
death. Yeah.
life or death, and
Everything matters suddenly, right?
yeah,
Yeah, if only we could capture that energy, and bring it into daily life of like, wow, this really matters. Like life is a matter of life and death, you know?
Yeah, and if so, yeah, and bring that violent, powerful, angry energy into the body and activate it, the truth of it,
Uh-huh.
without destroying and projecting it. We
Right.
could then have maybe some really passionate, vibrant conversation, and
Yes.
be like, okay, I'm not going to destroy you, but like, oh, you're so angry. Whoa, you're so angry. I'm so angry. Oh, the intensity, the intimacy, and the like, why are
Yes.
you angry? And I want to know you, and you want to know me, and like, what is this about? Like,
Yes.
and
Yes.
then
Bring,
yeah,
yeah, creating a conscious container where everybody feels like they're in consent to be there, right? Like
yeah.
agreeing, like let's do this thing. Yeah, it's beautiful to create a safe space to truly express and bring it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it makes me think of like Kali energy, the idea of like the destroyer, like
Yeah.
that's part of life. This like the energy of the birth and the creator and the destroyer. Yeah,
Yes.
and then
Totally.
and if we can inhabit those without it being destructive, without destroying, not I don't know, I guess just like destroying. Let's destroy ego ideas
Right.
and let's destroy stories that are lies that we told each other. Like let's
Yes.
destroy those, not each other.
Yes.
Let's
Exactly.
go after truth, like a hunger and a passion for truth, and
Yeah.
battle into that and go, that's what we want to really own. That's what we want to, follow that bliss into, like, oh, and then we could come out with a greater truth between us. Like, oh, then we could have the birth of a new world.
Yeah. Yeah. The high vibration of anger is clarity, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh, I love it.
We
Yeah.
need
And this,
we need it and we tend to repress it. We repress all of the emotions that are not popular and then they
mhm,
fester and then we think they're scarier because they're under the surface festering where we've repressed them. But if
yeah.
we just had the volcano open to like spew in its glory whenever it were like, inspired to spew, yeah, we'd have a more authentic world.
Yeah, yeah, and then I love what you said because you're externalizing the critic. Because if I keep it internalized and then all the criticisms about me and it could create trauma and hurt. But if I
Yeah.
externalize and go, okay, we're critiquing this that I've created, this
Hmm.
critic, and we can have that you know conversation about. It's then not about damaging self. It's
Right.
about yeah, re-seeing that what that that critic is.
Yeah, it can become a growth process. Like that, the thing
Yeah,
is that when the inner critic is in the blind spot in the shadows, I think of it like a kind of like a parasite on our brain. Like it's like kind of like sucking our life energy. It's living off of us and it's also masquerading as us. You know how like a parasite will like kind of like basically like you think that it's you. So
yeah, yeah.
we identify with the critic and you can actually like see that in people's language, how they'll say things like, I hate myself. I'm so mad at myself. I'm so frustrated with myself. I can't stand myself. And it's like, who is I and who is myself? Like, who the
Yeah,
hell is this myself that we can't stand? If you
yeah.
think about it, like that's like the sweet, innocent, beautiful, trying hard part of us.
Mhm,
And I is the critic. So we like actually identify more as the critic than with myself, you know,
mhm,
when we get into that against ourselves thing. I becomes the subject. I, the critic, doesn't like myself. And so myself is left to kind of like basically unprotected. I myself is just like only like the one that gets arrows thrown, but generally just tends to not have a voice. So
mhm,
that's what you do when you separate the critic out is you can start identifying as myself, which is very lovely. It's like it's our authentic selves. That's what myself is our authenticity. So it is really, really helpful to get the critic out. And then once it's out, then all of a sudden, like because this process starts usually when we're about 4, when we first get our feelings hurt socially, I think is when the critic starts, or if you have a family that's really highly critical, maybe
mhm,
earlier. But the process starts then, and then like the one trick pony thing, it's just like the critic still says the same thing to you today as it said when you were 4. It's just like it's still saying the same exact thing. It's not interesting at all. It's super boring.
mhm,
But when it's out, then the relationship becomes dynamic. Then you're having a discussion. Then myself gets to be 50 years old instead of 4 years old, and myself gets to say like, wait a minute. Like, what do you really want from me? Because usually if the critic is like, whatever, You're always making the wrong choices, you know? So if I ask the critic, well, what do you want from me? I want you to succeed. And it's like, well, if you're always yelling at me about always making the wrong choices, that's not very helpful for me to, it's not helping me to succeed if that's what you really want. If you want to help me succeed, this is how you could do that, you know, like, and so then it can become a co-created experience where the critic gets upgraded to a coach,
Hmm.
gets upgraded to like the, because it has so much power, 85%, you know,
Yeah.
that's a lot of power. We want that working for us instead of against us.
Yeah, and I think of like the inner critic is really like the inner guardian. You know, it's like it's somewhere along the lines we made a pact with it to guard ourselves from our own feelings. Like,
Yes,
oh, that hurt, and it said, oh, here, let me protect you.
right.
That was bad. That person's a bad person. You're good. You're not bad, but internally you're like, I feel like I'm a bad. Yeah, we'll guard against that. Let's wrap that up, and I'll keep it. And
Uh-huh.
I'm not gonna let you see it. I'll keep it over here, and but I'll
Uh-huh.
let you know not to come over here. You know?
Right, don't touch this stuff.
Don't
Or
touch this stuff.
also another version of that that I think happens a lot is like, oh, if I that hurt so much when that person said I was bad. That hurt so much that if I just tell myself that I'm bad, I'll like be like kind of like creating this like temperance, like I'm gonna build up my own inner strength by I'm the one who gets to say whether or not I'm bad. And then when it comes as criticism from the outside world, then it won't hurt as much because I've already kind of toughened myself up, you know, on an ongoing basis. I already know I'm bad, you know.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah, and it's like facing, you know, the truth of what it is makes us face our emotions. You know, it's like we have to face and resolve our emotions if we're going to be truthful to
Mm,
ourselves.
yeah, and let them go. Like
Yeah.
let them be. Let those emotions. I was just thinking this morning how the word motion is inside emotion. Like emotions, they want to move, and we tend to be against them. And when we're against them, we get them stuck. Like they
Hmm.
don't move. They just rigidify. But if
Hmm.
we can, they say that it only takes like 90 seconds for an emotion to actually move
Hmm.
if you give it that time and choose it and feel it, then it'll move through. But if we're resisting it, you know, you could do that for decades.
Yeah, which is, the cause of disease. A lot
Yes,
of illnesses is those stuck emotions. So,
yes,
which
yes.
probably we look to socially, the cause of war is stuck emotion.
Right.
Yeah. So,
Yes. Back to sexual healing.
back to sexual. Yes. Yeah. 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 Well, tell me a little bit more. That's a good topic to go on to. Sexual healing. What's happening? What's that about? You feel like?
Well, I mean, we were talking before about repression, and if there's anything that's repressed in society, it's our animal natures, our sexuality, right? Adam and Eve are all covered up. You know, sex is like advertised, but not really seen in movies or in person or in public or anything. It's always behind closed doors. We're not taught about our sexuality. We're not taught how to touch ourselves or touch other people. We're not taught how to communicate about touching or being touched. There's a lot of missing education in this world.
Hmm.
And sex is the most repressed, I would say, more than anger, you know, more than
Hmm.
sadness, more than grief, you know.
Hmm.
Sex is the most repressed. And yet we need it for the continuation of the human species. It's completely essential.
Yeah.
It's the one thing that we actually need as a race is sex, you know? And it's like the thing that's the most shamed and repressed. So I think that more than anywhere else in our bodies and in our lives, you know, we have ubiquitous chronic sexual trauma. Just I think every person, unless they were magically raised in a like sex positive environment with like all the perfect education and community and everything, I don't know where that exists. I think we're all carrying it around in our genitals, in our bodies, in our hearts, in our minds, everywhere. You know, I think that are not we don't know how to be friendly with our sexuality. We don't, there isn't a place
Yeah.
for it, you know, even if you kind of do have somehow a kind of behind the scenes positive experience with your own sexuality, you still have to pretty much hide it when you walk out in the world,
Yeah.
you know. Talk about like cancel culture, you know, it's just like, you know, there's lots of arrows that get flung, and all of the bare boundaries that get crossed, that those were all inherited too. Anybody who is an abuser was probably also abused. It's a long chain of abuse, because of repression. So I feel like the best, deepest healing that we could possibly have is a hands-on sexual healer on every block, like just like you could go
Mhm.
to a massage therapist, you could go to a sexual healer who would touch you in ways that helped you reorient to loving yourself and to feeling safe in your sexuality and feeling loved and held and safe in your sexuality. And it's just a huge missing piece in our world. And yeah, I think it's the most important, one of the most important things that we could do is devise a way for people to have access to that, because it's the most beautiful thing, to feel embraced in our sexuality. And some people get lucky enough to find a partner that they can explore with and that can kind of hold them that way. But even within most primary relationships, there's a lot of miscommunication that happens, and not knowing how to stand for ourselves or ask for what we want or know what we want. And it's a big pain in the world. It's a really deep, big pain. And
Yeah.
yeah, and I feel also committed to being a part of the healing of that.
Mhm. That's beautiful. Yeah, and I think there's so much there. There's so yeah, the diversity of who we really are is many many of us can't, myself included, start to face that or explore that. It's like, whoa, I'm more diverse than I realize, and
Mhm.
tapping into. I think it kind of goes back to you could probably begin the work yourself of just tapping into pleasure, tapping into
Yeah.
the going into the shower, like you start off with,
Yeah.
starting with exploring your own joy and your own pleasure. Uh, really start connecting with that, making
Yeah.
those choices.
Right. It's really nice that we can do some of it by ourselves, but also so much of our sexual trauma happens in relationship, like somebody touches us in a way that we didn't like, or then a way we weren't consenting with, or a way that hurt us. And so I feel like we absorb that into our bodies, and that we can heal some of that ourselves, but to have somebody else who is a safe person coming in and showing you, like, I'm another human being, I'm here with you, and I'm going to touch you in this way that you asked me for, and I'm only going to touch you in the ways that you want, and I will not touch you in any way that you don't like, and I will stop and I want you to tell me when to stop. And just creating a space where you learn to communicate about what's going on for you, because it tends to happen like hands groping in the dark and everything happening so fast, and
Yeah.
like two people touching each other at the same time, and there's like just it's just like a recipe for disaster.
Mhm.
Yeah, so
Well,
I
and I
do
even think
agree.
it expands not just sexual, but just intimacy in general. Like
Mhm.
really, just the whole realm of intimacy is
Yes. Yeah.
closed. That touching another, just even non-sexually, we're
Yes.
repressed, and just reaching out, touching, giving a hug. And I think because sexually we're repressed, a touch becomes sexual when it doesn't, because it taps into those realms. That okay, I know we don't touch each other. Nobody touches. I would connect, and
Right.
especially that
Right.
isolation that happens.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Again, yeah, like that, like we were saying with isolation, the nuclear family, like everybody like shrink into your little box, shrink into your little corner. Yeah, and more tribal communities, there is a lot more kind of fluidity, and kids will puppy pile and all like, laying in a group together, or, you know, you'd be touching several people at a time, and it's just so natural, and you could have your clothes on or off. And yeah, just there's got to be a better way than what we've come up with.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
like basically just turned ourselves into computers on top of this like stick figure,
Yeah.
little walking computer on top of a stick figure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know when I was in India, it was very common for two men to just men to be walking down the street arm in arm, holding like this, arm in arm next to each other,
Yeah.
touching, holding, and now it's become, oh, that's sexual, sexual. I'm not gay. I'm this. I'm that. Don't touch me. It's like, oh my gosh.
Right. There's so many fears, so much fear
Yeah.
of judgment, so much fear of being put in some kind of box, labeled,
Yeah.
fear that there's something wrong with us, whatever our, our desires are and our inclinations are. Just
Yeah.
there's so many different kinds of people in this world. If we could only just all take care of ourselves,
Mm, I love
accept
it.
all parts of ourselves.
Yeah, so true.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time. This is a beautiful conversation. I love where it
Yeah.
led us to too. So, um, if
Yeah.
anyone wanted to find your work or what you're doing, how can we find you? How can they find
Yeah. My website is just my name, amypalatnick.com.
you? Excellent.
And there's many ways to reach out to me through that. And maybe I'll send you that link for the inner critic workshop. That's
Sure.
kind of my gift to the world, one of my gifts to the world. I want everybody to have their own little
I
little
love it.
critic outside their bodies. And yeah, yeah, I think a quick Google search will get you there.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, sweet. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Adam. You've been a great interviewer. I just really
Oh,
felt
thanks.
so comfortable and it was just so easy. It was one of
Oh,
my most relaxed and enjoyable interviews I've ever done.
oh, thanks. And I loved it because I was like, I have no idea where this conversation is going to go, but it really went to some beautiful places. So I loved it.
Yeah,
So, all
yeah.
right.
Thank
Okay. Thanks. Have a great day.
Okay, thanks. You too.
Bye bye.
Bye.